Within an hour, Brannon, of the first missile striking a U.S. city or even a U.S. military installation, the shelves will be bare. You will not find batteries. You will not find food. You will not find gasoline when you go to fill up your car. There'll be lines for miles.
May God save.
You are watching Worldview 2, built on the 35 years of Worldview books, documentaries, research, high-profile interviews, and the radio and television broadcasts of Brannon House.
Colonel Rob Maness has a lifelong record of providing dedicated service to this nation. Having worked his way up from the enlisted ranks to full colonel, he served our country for more than 32 years. He has served as a bomber squadron commander, bomb disposal technician, Joint Chiefs of Staff Operations Officer, assisted the National Security Team with the campaign plan for the global war on terrorism. He authored the first theater nuclear war plan and served as the Vice Commander of America's largest airborne intelligence wing. Colonel Rob Maness is a true American hero. This is Rob Maness Live.
Grace was phenomenal. She loved everyone and she loved everything.
She was my best buddy. She went hunting with me. We got her a red convertible when she turned 18. Yeah, it was just a joy. We'd get out on the highway and she would say, "Let her rip, Dad." And so we would.
COVID-19 injections. After facing 4 years of the Biden administration's efforts to undermine the public's access to information in my oversight work, I immediately issued a subpoena to HHS when I became chairman of this committee. The subpoena records I am releasing today, which are discussed in the interim report, do not contain FOIA redactions and will finally provide the public a more complete understanding of the Biden administration's awareness of the risks of myocarditis following COVID-19 injection.
There's 1,065 papers in the peer-reviewed literature on COVID vaccine myocarditis. 42-year-old man comes into Washington University Hospital with vaccine myocarditis. The infection is ruled out. It's the vaccine. He's in the hospital. This is one of our best hospitals in the United States. He dies 3 days after taking Moderna. They can't save him in the hospital.
It's really horrifying, right? First you heard Senator Ron Johnson and then Dr. Peter McCullough yesterday on a new report led by Senator Ron Johnson that the Biden White House knew about deadly heart risks tied to COVID shots like myocarditis, but deliberately hid it from Americans. Joining us now, internist and cardiologist, you just heard in that testimony, Dr. Peter McCullough. Doctor, always great to have you on. But Biden officials, Dr. Fauci, far-left liberals attacked and bullied and silenced Americans who raised concerns about this. And now we're going to see red flag warning labels on COVID shots. This is a total disgrace what happened to Americans. You know what happened in the pandemic? It turned everybody on the street into bullying bureaucrats. That's the problem.
Congratulations to Senator Ron Johnson and his persistent, diligent efforts to uncover the truth. That report you just showed is 54 pages. It's a synopsis, 217 citations. We had multiple experts testify to really our observations that this was a serious complication, myocarditis or heart damage that can lead to cardiac arrest or heart failure. It was occurring, and the Biden administration and their public health agencies tried to cover it up.
So didn't the Israeli health officials warn the CDC 10 months into the pandemic in February about myocarditis from COVID shots, notably in young people after these Pfizer shots and Moderna shots? I mean, but then they still got emergency use authorization. And then by April, they were looking at the data, the CDC under Biden, from Israel and the Pentagon, yet instead of telling the public, they stayed quiet. Isn't the COVID shot a protein that actually circulates through the blood that we've never seen before?
It's true. We reviewed the Israeli communications. They had 62 cases of myocarditis very early on in 2021. 2 were fatal. Now research shows the spike protein produced from the vaccines circulates in the blood. The messenger RNA and the spike protein are in the human heart when it's examined at the time of autopsy. The vaccine is the direct cause of cardiac damage.
Totally frightening stuff. Dr. Peter McCullough, thank you for bringing us this story and staying on it. We'll stay on it as well. It's good to see you.
Welcome back to Truth Thursday, folks. The Rob Maness Show's live on Worldview Tube and our X Spaces simulcast. Well, government does not deserve your faith, but God does. That's the show today. These Senate panel findings confirm a disturbing truth. Health officials knew of vaccine risks, but kept them hidden from the public. History has shown that government-backed medical policies have led to tragic injustices, just as seen in the Tuskegee experiments and the treatment of Native American communities and the anthrax vaccine imposed on the military. I just did a show about that a few weeks ago. Today, we're going to learn about the heartbreaking case of Grace Schirra, a 19-year-old Down syndrome woman who was killed in what many are terming a medical murder due to medical protocols ruthlessly applied to her and possibly tens of thousands of other Americans, maybe even more. Her medical battery case trial began on June 2nd, on Monday. And you're going to hear things like this coming from the trial. And I'll quote it. Nurse McInnes injected Grace Schirra with morphine, a powerful opioid drug that suppresses breathing. Her only defense against these drugs was breathing. Dr. Shokar placed an order, do not resuscitate, close quote. Back with us as my guest today to talk about this and where we should be putting our faith is Reverend Dr. Robert A. Schuller. Reverend Schuller is a pastor, author, and motivational speaker. He carries forward his father's vision with passion and dedication. With decades of experience in ministry and numerous books to his names, like this latest one, God Always Wins, Divine Liberation from the Gods of Woke. He was with us a few weeks ago to talk about it. Robert focuses on equipping people to overcome the challenges and embrace possibility thinking. Dr. Schuller, welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. And I got to ask you, that first clip I got from your booker's email she sent me, the results of this report that Senator Johnson and Dr. McCullough have got out into the media, although this show's not about the vaccine itself, it is about the COVID medical protocols and what happened to Grace, which is tragic. But it just shows, I wanted to show that because this whole episode has shaken the faith of every American in the medical community and the government community, especially the government medical professional community. We have almost zero faith in this government anymore, in anything. We question every single thing, and we should question our government. But when you have to question every single output from your government, from the federal to the state to the local, because you can't trust them, we have a problem, don't we?
We absolutely do have a problem. And it's a problem that's been going on for a long time. And it actually started probably 100 years ago, nearly 100 years ago. If you want to look at the history of wokeism, which is really what has infiltrated and what is created the deep state we have, you have to go all the way back to the Frankfurt School in Germany in the 30s, which is made up of several Jews. And because being a Jew in Germany was not a good thing in the 1930s, they left Germany and came to the United States, and specifically Columbia University. And from there, they developed their woke ideology that has spread across the United States and into our government, and primarily coming and growing through the university systems that we support with our taxpayer dollars to build this woke ideology. And this woke ideology is developed and created in order that basically technocracy, which is the term given to governance by experts, and therefore the laity don't really have a voice in it anymore, is the foundation of wokeism, which is when it all boils down to it, comes down to communism. And so we have been fighting this battle, and the only thing which is in the way of globalism is the United States of America. And I shudder to think what would have happened if Kamala Harris was our president right now.
Yeah, it's amazing that this ideological infiltration of the Republic of the United States even tries to turn our Constitution upside down and use it against us. When you see
Exactly.
oppression and suppression of information and censorship, like what happened with the COVID pandemic, and like this trial is bringing out, even to the point of committing someone to death. Essentially, you have this. It's like a cult, a death cult, and the pro-abortion crowd is part of the other side. It's part of that woke ideology, and they insist that human being doesn't have a right to live. And this young woman, Grace, that we're going to talk about during the rest of the show, these medical professionals who are supposed to do no harm, first do no harm, and to protect all human life, essentially gave her the death penalty based on the quote that I just read. That's one quote out of this trial that's happening. It's amazing, folks. Children's Health Defense is running the trial live, and it's ongoing today, too. I checked beforehand and everything. And hopefully we can get that mic cut there. But it's just one of those things that we have to take this on. And faith is the place that I know that I've turned to even more increasingly over the last few years. Look, I worked in government for all of my life, and I am not someone that's prone to not trust all government. But I have to tell you, faith in God is the only thing that's keeping me sane right now. You've written about this a lot. What do you tell people about how to use their faith when they feel betrayed by every institution that we've ever trusted?
Well, we cannot trust institutions. There's only one thing you can trust. There is no such thing as a government. In the history of mankind, there's never been a perfect government. There never will be. The only thing that is perfect is the creator of the heavens and the earth, Yahweh. And if people understand and have a relationship with Yahweh, they will not follow and bow down to the government. That's why in the woke ideology, and that's why in communism, the first thing they have to do is they have to kill God. And that's what we saw in pretty vividly in the 60s when they took the Bible out of the school, they took the prayer out of the school, the cover of Time magazine. Many of your listeners probably too young to remember that print media used to be the only way we would get our news. They would throw in, there was this thing called a newspaper, and they would throw it at our front doors. And then you would read the newspaper, and then you could listen to the evening news. And then once a week, you had Time magazine and Newsweek magazine that would summarize the week's news. And so you get that once a week. And that's how we got our news. And so as a result of that, they put on the cover of Time magazine, God is dead. And that is the beginning of getting people to take their eyes off of God and put their eyes on the government and allow the government to care for them and give them all the right information as opposed to God. And once you do that, you fall down a rabbit hole of all of the gods of the woke, because in order to replace God, in order for the human mind to exist, because the human mind has the infinite capacity to create and to imagine, and as a result of that, we typically look for the worst possible solutions, or I should say, the worst possible outcomes. And as a result of that, we have to create defenses for those worst possible outcomes. And the history of humanity will show us that we constantly create a pantheon of gods to make this happen. The pantheon of gods that we're dealing with through wokeism is a pantheon of scientism, because through scientism, they can appear to be modern and real and authoritative, and yet be able to fulfill their narrative, because scientism is not real science. It is fake science that fits their narrative. So they create the science to support their narrative, to do whatever they want. And it begins by killing God. If science is real, you have to assume, okay, if the odds of something happening are this, and it's a huge number, and you have a very small number of odds being this, then science would say, well, you go with the odds, you take the what's the greater odds. And if that's the case, you have to believe in God. I mean, the odds of there not being a divine designer and divine creator is so astronomical in every way that it takes tremendous faith to be an atheist.
Yeah.
But through science, they have killed God in order to control the masses. And they have done the same thing. And the next thing people come into this awareness of what has taken place over the last 5 years in a lot of different directions. For me, I came from the physical side, of the health side, the medical side. And my history goes all the way back to my high school days, when I started questioning mainline medical model. I had cystic acne as a kid and as a teenager. And my mother would take me to the dermatologist, and he would hit each one of these big boils with cortisone. And then he would stick me under a sun lamp and burn my upper torso. And I'd spend an hour at the dermatologist every week doing this. My barber, did you hear me? My barber, the guy who cuts my hair, my barber says, Robert, have you ever thought about not drinking so much milk? I was drinking milk all the day long. It was my drink of choice. I didn't drink water or pop or anything else. I drank milk. And so what was it, a couple gallons a day maybe? I don't know. But he said, Robert, why don't you quit drinking milk and see what happens? I quit drinking milk, and my acne went away instantly, automatically, and I never went back to that dermatologist again. This is a doctor whose specialty is taking care of skin, and he sees this all the time. He never once bothered to ask me about my diet, that maybe I shouldn't drink a couple gallons of milk a day, and maybe that would have some impact. And so as a teenager, I'm scratching my head going, what's up with this?
Man.
And it just
we gotta take a commercial break. When we come back, we'll see a clip about the story of Grace Sherrod. Everybody, pay attention to this clip. Pay attention to this clip. It's a heartbreaking story. You will be outraged too. We'll be right back with Dr. Robert A. Schuller.
Hello, I'm Brandon House. I want to thank you for all your support at wvwfoundation.com that helps make possible pushing out 24/7 content for free. Without your support, we'd have to put it all behind a paywall. But thanks to you and your support through our foundation, we're able to push it out for free as a broadcast service and broadcast ministry of WVW Foundation. Please consider going there and setting up an automatic monthly contribution, or go there and make an occasional contribution. If you prefer to support us through the mail, you'll find our mailing address there at wvwfoundation.com. You can also call and make your contribution over the phone by calling 901-825-0652. That's 901-825-0652. Again, all these details are available at wvwfoundation.com. Thank you for your support as we try to help people around the world understand the times through the lens of a Christian worldview.
Here's Chewbacca. Or shoot. Grace was phenomenal. She loved everyone and she loved everything.
She was my best buddy. She went hunting with me. We got her a red convertible when she turned 18. Yeah, it was just a joy. We'd get out on the highway and she would say, "Let her rip, Dad." And so we would.
We found out that we were blessed with Grace having Down syndrome when she was born. Down syndrome is actually the presence of a third 21st chromosome, which she called her love chromosome, because everybody that knows a child with Down syndrome, they just love unconditionally. Down syndrome did not stop Grace whatsoever.
There wasn't a thing she didn't do. She rode horse, she played violin. My wife, who's gifted in teaching, taught her how to read and write.
The things that Grace taught me were really above and beyond whatever I taught her. I'm saying thank you very much.
Grace, God's grace, it's not the end. We'll see you again someday. I can't help but wonder, how can we turn this pain into a message, into a movement, into a movement.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's Truth Thursday, and we have to talk about the truth about asking people to consider whether they should put their faith in government anymore. And instead of doing that, put your faith where it belongs, with God. Look, I make no bones about it. I'm a Christian, and I have witnessed to people right on this show before that were atheists as my guests. And it is one thing to not believe in God. It's another thing to put your faith in human institutions like government to be turned over and over again away from what is supposed to be life-giving things like medical treatment. And I wanted to show that clip there of Grace Shira, the young lady we were talking about today, and whose trial for medical battery is ongoing. She passed away, but her parents took it to trial, and it's ongoing. You can go to Children's Health Defense website and find the live link to the trial itself. But my guest today is Dr. Robert A. Schuller, Reverend, and we're talking about how to deal with these types of situations, especially something like this. Dr. Schuller, this is a tragic loss, heartbreaking loss of a child. She was 19. She's a woman, really, but her parents, she's a Down syndrome woman, and they just love people unconditionally. Down syndrome people do. I've had many interactions with Down syndrome folks, and they're beautiful, beautiful people. And I can't imagine what her parents were thinking as they went through this. How do you counsel people as a pastor when they face a loss like this through medical protocols that have been misapplied or over aggressively applied?
I've had a lot of situations like this. We had a dentist here in where I lived in Southern California who actually killed several people. And finally his license was pulled and he was jailed, and he's out of business, of course. Thank God for that. But I had to deal with the families and the funerals. I participated in the funeral of Samantha Runyon, who was kidnapped out of her front yard and then just her body thrown in the front yard. And this is a 6-year-old girl who was just her life was tragically ended. Mm-hmm. And we look and we look at throughout history and throughout life of all the tragedy that we see and all the death that we see. And the important thing to remember when we look at death and when we look at life is it doesn't matter how we die, because everybody dies and we all will die. What matters is how we live. And we don't know how much longer we have. We may have a day, we may have an hour, we may have a 20 years, or might be 100 years. Only God knows how long we're going to live. The important thing for us as individuals, as Christians, and as as people of faith is to focus on living the way God wants us to live and following the guidance God has for us. But when we look at the tragedy of Grace, I can tell you that I had numerous friends who died a very similar death in a hospital during COVID. It was the hospitals were captured by big pharma. They were captured by misled government. And as a result of that, there was numerous people who faced, in effect, execution in the hospitals. And the reason for a lot of this is because hospitals have to follow the protocols, period. If a doctor violates a protocol to save your life, but in the process damages your pinky so it doesn't work just right, then the hospital gets sued for hundreds of thousands of dollars because, and yet they saved your life. But on the other hand, if the doctor follows the protocols and you die, that's the end of the story. So what happened is the hospitals put together protocols during COVID, which led to extreme death. And the doctors and the nurses, in many regards, were handcuffed and forbidden to proceed in life-saving procedures. They were required to give, in many cases, I know this is the case in my friend's situation, they were required to give them the remdesivir. They were required to give them these other protocols, all of which led to his demise. And I have no doubt that that has something to do with Grace's death. And much of this can be alleviated if you have a power of medical attorney given to someone. If you are single in the United States of America, if you're married, your spouse automatically has that power of attorney. Mm-hmm. However, if you are single in the United States of America, and the people I'm referring to were all single. Children don't help. Parents don't help. Since she was 19, if she had been a 17-year-old, her parents wouldn't be able to step in. They would have been able to take her out of the hospital. They would have been able to intervene. But she was 19, and as a 19-year-old, even though she had Down syndrome, and even though she was still under the care of her parents, they probably, now this is assumption, I haven't been able to verify this, they probably didn't have a power of attorney because they had taken care of her whole life. It never was an issue. So why would they go to the trouble of doing that? And yet we know today, because of this, that it's imperative, if you are single in the United States of America, you must get a power of attorney, because otherwise the hospitals can do whatever they want, and they're going to do whatever is most profitable. Hospitals are not, for the most part, are not nonprofit. They're profit entities. Yeah. The government during COVID gave them tremendous benefits, tens of thousands of dollars per patient if they dealt with COVID. And everything was so, unfortunately, we'll never have all the true numbers because the CDC required the government required the hospitals to falsify, in my opinion, falsify the records so that cause of death was, if anyone had tested positive for COVID, regardless of the actual cause of death, it was listed as a COVID death. And at the same time, the hospitals received tens of thousands of dollars more by listing it as a COVID death versus a heart attack or a motorcycle accident or whatever the main cause of death was.
Yeah. Do you think we'll ever know the true number? I mean, every time I hear some pontificator on the corporate media say, well, over 1 million people died because of COVID and all that, I think back to the respirators that they had in the protocol that were actually killing people. You pointed out the remdesivir. People, the nurses nicknamed that "Run, Death is Near." I did a show with a nurse that talked about that, because if you give it at the wrong time in the infection process with that particular disease, it ends up killing the patient instead of saving them, like it did with President Trump. They gave it to him at the right time, apparently, So
I didn't think
do you
Trump
think we'll
had
ever
remdesivir.
know?
I thought he had. I thought he had I thought he had not ivermectin, but hydroxychloroquine.
He did
And
have
that's
hydroxychloroquine, but he was given remdesivir and the monoclonal antibodies, I believe.
Okay.
But it was at the right time. The doctors that I talked to said the timing is important. Early in the infection is okay, but later when you're in the hospital, which is where they were using it on people.
That's when they were always given. Nobody would take it until they went to the hospital.
That's why the nurses were saying, run, death is near, unfortunately. But I don't think we'll ever know the numbers of who died from COVID or those who died with COVID but died due to the protocol. And that's a sad commentary on our society, man. I tell you what, we got to take another break, Dr. Schuler. When we come back, though, we'll see a clip from the trial. And I'll tell you an anecdote that I read about from her dad, from Grace's dad, the last time he saw her. And this is going to just break your heart. You will be crying.
It's a tragic
hopefully I can get through it. We'll be right back with Dr. Robert Schuler. It's Truth Thursday, and we're talking about the tragic case of Grace Schirra.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, I'm Brandon House. Would you like to gain access to over 20 years of my radio shows, TV shows, my books? I've written 15 books, and most of those books are ebooks now. And we have conference DVDs, conferences where we filmed our conferences at the Ozarks, literally starting 20 years ago. It's all available in our archived vault. All you have to do is go to worldviewtube.com/vault, worldviewtube.com/vault, and for a reasonable monthly fee, you gain access to over 20 years of Christian worldview programming, news, information, books, documentaries, and a powerful search engine. And folks, it's a great way not only to educate yourself, equip yourself, but it's a big way that you can help fund our continuation as a broadcast network. Please check it out. worldviewtube.com/vault, worldviewtube.com/vault, and help us continue pushing out a Christian worldview.
And Nurse Maness inject Grace Schirra with morphine, a powerful opioid drug that suppresses breathing. Like I said, her only defense against these drugs and the acid buildup killing her was breathing. Doctor showed her order. Took her breath away. Now her Grace was dead. This trial, we will show that Grace Schirra, a beautiful, gifted 19-year-old girl with Down syndrome, was killed by a deadly injection while dozens of medical personnel stood aside and nothing. I'm Warner Mendenhall, along with Mike Administrator, John Kleiner, Joe Boylan. We represent Scott Schirra, who represents the estate of his daughter, Grace Schirra.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's Truth Thursday, and we're talking about the heartbreaking case of Grace Schirra. And you just saw a little clip there from the Children's Health Defense TV showing part of the trial of medical battery that is happening. Her parents have brought to court. It wasn't dismissed. I don't think it's ever been done before, though, from what I understand, or it's been very rare. And this has been a long time since one of these cases made it to a courtroom. And my guest today is the Reverend Dr. Robert A. Schuler, who's an author, motivational speaker. And Dr. Schuler, I've got a lot of experience with chaplains and pastors in my life, and I know that chaplains and pastors spend almost as much time in hospitals counseling families, visiting patients, as the doctors and nurses and other professionals that work there. I wanted to ask you, they put a do not resuscitate order on this young woman against the consent of the parents. And I understand she was 19, but she was a Down syndrome child too. Did that surprise you that they did that?
Nothing surprises me what happens in a hospital today. I have so many stories I could share and tell that will turn your stomach. It's just overwhelming. If if you never want to go to the hospital unless it's absolutely vital for your life, because once you get in there, you're really at their mercy. And again, as I mentioned earlier, you must have somebody who is going to support you, who understands something about medicine and something beyond what mainline medicine wants to do. Because mainline medicine, their whole goal forever has been to manage sickness as opposed to create health. I mentioned the illustration of my cystic acne when I was a teenager. As soon as I got well, the doctor lost his income from me. And I'm sure it was a pretty good income. And so they want to keep you sick and manage your sickness. And that's the way mainline medicine in America is today. And they keep you well through pharmakeia, pharmacy. The word pharmakeia in the Bible is what is referred to as witchcraft. But that is their means of keeping people sick and keeping them alive long enough for them to make money. So I don't take any pharmaceutical drugs at all. I'm 70 years old. I'm not on any blood thinners, no Lipitor, none of that. I will avoid all of that at all costs, because I believe that God designed our bodies to seek wellness, to be healthy, and there are things we can do to change our chemistry within our body so we don't need these things. But again, that's been a lifelong journey of mine, and I'm unique in that way. And as a pastor, few pastors have had that same journey. And as a result of that, I understand what happens. So if you find yourself where you're in a hospital and in a situation of grace, my heart just goes out to her, because first of all, I don't know how the hospital has any defense other than to say their protocols. And if their protocols lead to death and to murder, I don't think that is any defense as well. And I'm inclined to think that's where it's going to go, because if she had COVID, then they probably had her on a ventilator. If they had her on a ventilator, that means if she was on a ventilator, that means she was in a coma. They put them in an artificial coma in order to use a ventilator. They have to. Mm-hmm. And if that's the case, what are they giving her morphine for? Morphine is to take away the pain. If you're in a coma, you don't have any pain. So right. Think about what is their excuse? The only thing I can think of, the only thing that makes any sense to me is things like, and again, I'm just speculating, this will all come out in court. The things that come out in my mind is that she's running out of insurance. The insurance is going to cover her. They did some other things they weren't supposed to do, so they're going to cover it up. And what I do know is if a patient dies in the hospital, there is a maximum of results as far as suing the hospital is concerned. I believe in the state of California, and in the last 10 years, it's been about $250,000. If you die in the hospital is liable for a maximum, I think, of $250,000. You can look that up and correct me, but it's a minimal amount, as opposed to if she lives and she's disabled, then the hospital is liable for God only knows how many millions of dollars. So a hospital is incentivized to kill the patient versus getting them out alive if they've done any malpractice or could be in jeopardy of any malpractice. What's wonderful about this case is that all of this is going to come out in court. The world is going to know. Whether or not it's suppressed is another story, but I pray that and my belief is that because we have an opportunity to restore the NIH, the CDC, and the FDA because of the new leadership we have through Robert F. Kennedy Jr., I'm inclined to believe he's going to use this like he has done his lawsuits with Monsanto to address the glyphosate issue. I believe he's going to be able to use this as a means of restoring true health and wellness, and changing so many of the things that have taken place in our health industry over the past few decades.
Right. Yeah. Her parents call this medical murder. And I read a story from her dad, and her dad tells an anecdote about his experience. His last time he saw her alive, he was in the room with her and he was feeding her, and the nurse came in and said, "Hey, her oxygen level's at 85. You can't do that." And she was using the system that was hooked up to her through the hospital, and he had a little pocket pulse ox meter that he put on her finger, and he said, "No, it's showing, this little $50 device shows it's 95. That's a dramatic difference." And the nurse,
normal. That's close to normal.
Yeah, exactly right. And the nurse checked it out and said, "Yeah, the sweating tends to mess on the leads of the hospital system, tends to mess with the readout." So they were trying to keep her from eating, from getting nourishment, because of a false pulse ox reading that the dad used a $50 device in his pocket. And then you know what happened, Dr. Schuler? They sent an armed guard to remove him from the room in the hospital, and he was never allowed to go back in because he was feeding her, and he showed the nurse a real pulse ox reading with a $50 device. And that, he says, that's the last time he saw her alive. I think they're right. This sounds like medical murder to me. What about you? How do you feel about that?
Well, the hospital would see it as medical malpractice. And if it's medical malpractice and she gets well, then they are at risk of a huge lawsuit. On the other hand, if she dies, it's a very limited lawsuit they'd face. So that's where the hospital administration comes in and says, "Well, we'll give her this morphine," and they murdered her for profit and for gain. That's what I'm inclined to believe. I don't like to jump ahead of the court case. I'm gonna watch this closely, and we're gonna see what happens. But it's my hope and my prayer, and I want everyone to pray with me, that this leads to medical reforms that are going to bring health and wellness into America and make America healthy again. Because we need, as Americans in the United States of America, we need to bring health back into the whole picture and wellness back into the picture, as opposed to managing our sickness. And it's not going to happen until we break through this mentality and quit worshiping the God of medicine and start worshiping Yahweh, the creator of heavens and earth, who tells us and shares with us how we can find health and wellness and how we can stay out of the hospital. Because the only reason you really want to go to the hospital is if you're injured, you're in a motorcycle accident, you're in a car accident, you fall off of a building, and your body, and you're Humpty Dumpty, and you have to be put back together again. That's the only reason you really want to go into the hospital. And they're really good at doing that, putting Humpty Dumpty back together again. And I thank God that we have that. But if you're sick, you don't want to go to a hospital. You want to find another way to get well, and there are ways to do that. And in my book, God Always Wins, Divine Liberation from the Gods of the Woke, I talk about the way God wants you to be healthy. And we find our health by rejecting the God of sickness and focusing on the God of wellness. And that is Yahweh, the creator of the heavens and the earth, because God is all about life. Satan is all about destruction and death. And it's only by focusing on God and his power to heal and to create and bring wholeness and life that we find a life worth living, and a life that's going to live well and according to God's plan for us.
Yeah, I mean, and he's the great designer
100%.
He designed our bodies to heal themselves. He designed our bodies to maximize how it's fed and nourished with certain things. Mr. Kennedy's push to go back to beef tallow away from seed oils at fast food restaurants always springs to my mind when I think about how God designed us, because while, yes, vegetables and fruits may be part of the diet he designed us to do, he gave most of the power to keep our bodies going and fueled and to heal through animals, through animal fat and those kinds of things. And it shows that when we changed our methodologies of cooking from things like beef tallow to these seed oils, you can go right back to the time frame where it shows that, and you can see where America especially started to become type 2 diabetes, obesity epidemics, and those kind of things. So we've got to take one more break, Dr. Schuler. When we come back, we'll see a little clip about from some supporters of Grace and her parents. And I want to get your take and what your advice you give in the book to folks that are going through a process like this, and what we can do and how we can pray to support these folks in this trial, because it's very important. We'll be right back with Dr. Robert A. Schuler.
Hello, I'm Brandon House. Is the government tracking you? Do they have access to all your data? Well, if you go to worldviewtalk.com, you'll find out about a cell phone company that, does not store your data. They don't do that. This is what they're known for. They don't store your data. You have privacy. You're not being tracked. That's why a lot of folks are turning to worldviewtalk.com. You'll find their prices are very competitive. All the details are there at worldviewtalk.com. Again, worldviewtalk.com. Oh, while you're there, not only do they have cell phones that aren't tracking you, you can find out about how to get a satellite phone. Should the whole system go down and you want to communicate with a family member or loved one, you might want to have a satellite phone. Or how about their solar generators? They have great solar generators. Check them all out right now. Worldviewtalk.com, worldviewtalk.com.
I support Grace's case because I was nearly killed by COVID hospital protocol with the deadly drug remdesivir, among others. Grace's case is the first COVID hospital protocol case to go to trial. Let's give thanks to God and support the Shara family as they represent all hospital victims. If you or your loved one were harmed, post your video holding your loved one's photo and stating, "I support Grace's case because my loved one was killed with hospital protocol." Let's fill this post with truth of those harmed and support the Sharas. Grace's victory is our victory. God bless.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. Grace's victory is our victory. And you can find videos all over social media and the internet from folks that are stepping up and voicing their support for Grace Shara and her mom and dad, who are in this case that's in trial right now at children'shealthdefense.tv, chd.tv, I think is the website where you can watch the trial live and support them and find out how you can, donate and those kind of things. But my guest today is Dr. Robert A. Schuler, who's author of, Divine Liberation from the Gods of Woke. God Always Wins is the main title of the book. And that's what we're talking about here today, Dr. Schuler, is how folks can get involved, but also keep your eye on what's true. And really what's true and is going to help people the most is keep your eye on God and what God wants us to do and what God teaches us about how to get through situations like this, right?
Absolutely. The title of the book is God Always Wins. And we have to remember that. It gives us hope. It lets us know that we're on the right side when we're on his side, that we're going to win. And it may be the winning isn't living forever, because you were talking a little bit before we went into break about about health and wellness. And Genesis 6:6 says our days will not be forever. They will be 120 years. That is right out of the Bible. That's what God says. So if we lived a perfectly healthy life, that means if we weren't poisoned through our negative thoughts or the food we eat, the environment in which we live, we could live to be 100 years old. If we had perfect food where our body was perfectly given the perfect nutrients it needs to replicate itself and heal itself, and if we didn't get in an accident, if we didn't fall off a roof or down the stairway, and if all those things happened, we would live to be 120 years. That's what God said in Genesis 6:6. Man's days shall not be forever; they shall be 120 years. So we just live as close to that as we can, realizing that God gave us the food to eat. And so people talk about diet and how about I do this and that, and I've been teaching for over 25 years that the way that diets can become very simple if you simply realize the way to eat is to eat food as close to the way that God made it as you possibly can. And quite frankly, that's all you can do, because we have Big Ag who's poisoning us in many ways through spraying all of your grains with glyphosate a week or two before it's harvested. Then we eat this glyphosate, and we know how bad glyphosate is. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. won the first huge case against Monsanto as how dangerous glyphosate is. Meanwhile, there's a dozen or more cases standing in line against showing how bad glyphosate is. So they're poisoning us, and then they're so in effect lighting a fire in the backyard and then coming to the front door and selling you a fire extinguisher. Here's the drug you have to take care of the side effects you have from this glyphosate. And so we just have to eat food as close to the way God made it as we possibly can. So that means if you're not eating organic grains, you're eating glyphosate, you're throwing fuel on the fire, and you're not going to live as long and healthy as God would want you to live. So from a health standpoint, that's critical. From a theology standpoint, and getting rid of the stresses in our life, we have to focus on the fact that God always wins. That then frees us. It takes the shackles off of our mind that government wants to put on our mind and enslave us with, because then we're much more controllable. If we live in a state of fear, the government comes in and says, "I'll take care of you. Just do these things and you'll be fine." And that has never worked throughout history. God's design for governance has always been a democracy. And then when the Israelis, the early Israelites came to God and said, "We want a king," they gave up their democracies, and we've seen the history of what's taken place as a result. But today we have the freedom of living in the United States of America, and it's up to us to maintain this freedom. And in order to maintain our freedom, first and foremost, we must constantly look to God, because it is only through His divine liberation that we remain free. And so there are these gods that government wants to put upon us, and every government, because there is no such thing as a perfect government. Sin continues to infiltrate and wiggle and its way into the most purest of hearts. And as a result of that, we see corruption, and we see death, and we see destruction. And so we must constantly keep our eyes focused. We must constantly come to God in prayer. We must constantly put God first in our life. We have to open our eyes and see what are the gods of the woke, which is what I do in the book. I go through the gods of the woke, And then we discover how to defeat these gods through the I am statements of Jesus, who says, I am the way, I am the truth, I am the life, I am the light of the world, I am the door, I am the good shepherd. And he continues to tear down these gods of the woke, the gods of the woke being the god of anti-God. In other words, we have to destroy God and create our scientific foundation for how the world really works. But it's not scientific. It is instead just an agenda that is created to support the narrative of the fact that God is dead. And then you have anti-family, anti-human, the god of anti-character, anti-straight, white Christian male, the god of anti-health and wellness, which is what we've been talking about today.
Yeah.
The god of anti-human flourishing, the god of anti-free market capitalism, the god of anti-truth, and the god of pro-blood sacrifice. And I think that's another topic for another day as we go through, as we could go through blood sacrifice, starting with Adam. God created the first blood sacrifice to clothe Adam.
That's
the
right.
First Son of God.
Absolutely. We have put the medical community up on a pedestal and made them, godlike. I mean, my mother's 84 years old, and she still talks about doctors with a reverence that's not shown to any other people. How do we address that now? Because I think we have to address that from a faith perspective now, because of what we've seen with this. I mean, this case of Grace with this medical murder. That's what I think it is, because people put their trust in these individuals that have a piece of paper showing that they know more about the human body and the mind than anybody else. How do we counsel people to wade through this now that we've seen what can happen, so that we can save lives instead of sacrificing them on this altar of medicine?
It becomes a situation where you have the red or the blue pill. Which one are you going to take? If you take the blue pill, you continue to stay in this mentality that your doctor is God and that he wants to save you, and take his medicines, follow everything he tells you, and you will be well, which is a lie. Otherwise, you can take the red pill and suddenly you're going to be blown. Your mind's just going to be overwhelmed with what is going on. And it's that simple. What are you going to believe? The Bible tells us how to live healthy and well for a long time. I talk about this in the chapter of my book. What is the biblical way to find health and to find wellness? And I talk about it begins with fasting and prayer. And you're, well, what fasting and prayer, that can't do too much. It can do more than you could ever imagine. Trust me, physically. I can give you two examples of how fasting saved my health. In the 80s, the drug Lipitor came out. Lipitor was the patented statin drug that more people are on than should be. I promise you there's half the people who are on statin drugs should not be. The side effects of statin drugs are really bad. They make you weak. They make you dizzy. I mean, the list goes on. I mean, so how did the drug company, I can't remember who made Lipitor, but how did they go about marketing this? What they did, and this would have been like 84, 85. I witnessed this. I watched the whole thing. 84, 85, everything on television. Again, we had newspapers and we had television with 3 stations. You didn't have 100 stations like you have now. You don't have the internet. You had radio, so that was one option. But everywhere you turned, it, like on the morning shows and everything, everybody was talking about cholesterol. All the books on the New York Times bestsellers list that dealt with health was all about cholesterol. So you have your HDLs, your LDLs, and you have this mathematical equation that you formulate. And at the end of the formulation, you find out whether you're going to die of a heart attack or not.
Yeah.
And so this is what they've created, this fear and this awareness of cholesterol. Part of that, nobody knew what cholesterol was. You go pre-19,
exactly.
Nobody paid attention to cholesterol. It didn't exist. And so all of a sudden, after a year of that, we're here to save the world. We have Lipitor, and it'll control your cholesterol. And everyone went to their doctor, and if it was over 240, they got their prescription. And guess what? It wasn't enough. The drug company didn't sell enough Lipitor. So what did they do? They went back to the CDC and they said, you got to lower what a safe number is. 240 is too high. We're not selling enough drugs. And the CDC went along with that, and they lowered the number so that more people would qualify, and a lot more people qualified, and they exceeded their sales projections, and they're happy. And that number still exists to this day.
It sure does. I get it read to me when I get my physical, every time I get my physical every year. Well, Dr. Schuler, thank you so much for joining us today. This is a tough subject. We pray for Grace and her family and all those that were impacted by these nasty protocols and the whole episode in our country. And the book is God Always Wins. And Dr. Robert A. Schuler, sir, thank you very much.
Thank you. You have a great day. And one final statement. Fast for 3 days, and your liver will heal itself, and your cholesterol will be healthy.
Well, thank you very much, sir. Appreciate it. And thank you for praying for us and for coming up and counseling us on this tough situation. Monday, I'll see you then. It's More Monday again, unfortunately. And I wish the news was better. Hopefully we'll get some good news this time over the weekend instead of the news we got last weekend. Have a great weekend.
You're watching Worldview 2, built on the 35 years of Worldview books, documentaries, research, high-profile interviews, and the radio